Hello, hello, hey, sweet people. Welcome to another episode of Inglês no Rádio. Ask me anything. I'm not exactly sure what the title of these episodes is going to be, but the idea was recently on the show, we asked you, our listeners, to send us your questions. And the idea was that Alexia and I were going to answer your questions live on the show, try to give you our best and most honest answers to whatever questions you might have. Could be related to English, could be related to anything. And we received a lot of really interesting and really awesome questions. You guys continue to impress us. But unfortunately, today it's just me because Alexia is dealing with our dog right now. So she is at the vet and I am in the podcast studio. So today we have a question from one of our favorite students, Ricardo, as we may say in English. So Ricardo is an excellent English student. He has not been studying for too much time, relatively, and he's just an excellent example of a curious student who's dedicated and motivated. Just his desire to learn more about the English language is very, very natural and obvious to me, and it's quite contagious. I absolutely love having Ricardo as one of our students. So we're going to take a listen to his question, and I will try to give my best answer. And just a warning, this is the first time I am hearing this question, so maybe I will give a really terrible answer. I hope not, but here we go.
Hello, Foster. Hey, Alexa. Ricardo here from Joinville, Santa Catarina. I may have a question about feeling kind of stuck because I've been studying English for more than a year, and my main method to study is listening to podcasts and also reading. I started reading books. I'm still feel that I kind of stuck and I stopped improving. I know that sometimes it's hard to measure, right? But I would like to ask you if you guys have any kind of tips or hint about how to overcome that feeling that we are stuck. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ricardo, for the very thoughtful question, as always. So just to summarize and make sure that I understood your question correctly, you have been studying English for more than a year now, and you made a lot of improvements. You are primarily using podcast and reading to study, but nowadays you're feeling a little bit stuck. You have a feeling of stagnation, like you're not making improvement. And you really want to know, how can you overcome that feeling? How can you get unstuck, let's say? And how can you get back on the path where you feel like you're making consistent, good progress every day? So this is a fantastic question. I think some variety of this question is one of the most common questions that I receive as an English teacher. Most students arrive to me and say something like, hey, I've studied English for a long time, but I don't feel like I'm improving, or I feel stuck, or I get nervous. It's some version of this feeling of being stagnated and not being able to escape from this feeling. So I have a lot of opinions about this topic, and some of them might be a little bit controversial, but hopefully they will be useful. So my first question to you, Ricardo, would be, are you really stuck? Because I imagine you are probably not as stuck as you think you are. So, learning a language is not a linear process. Obviously, there are ups and downs. It's not like each day you improve by 1%. It's kind of a crazy roller coaster ride. And that is a feeling, right? That's an emotional roller coaster that you are on. But I would ask you, are you really stuck? Or is that just a feeling that you have? And that's a very difficult question to answer. So, something I would suggest to experiment with is tracking your progress. So, there are many different ways that you can track or measure your English, your language studies. So, this could be, I don't know, whatever you want to measure, the amount of time you are spending. You could listen to recordings of your voice, but I would recommend being very specific. So normally I would recommend doing something that is more output focused. So you said you're listening to a lot of podcasts and you are reading. It's difficult to measure like the exact percentage of the podcast that you are understanding or how difficult something is for you to read. It's easier to measure your output. So when I say output, I'm referring to essentially just speaking. It could be writing as well. But you can measure how well you are writing, how many words you are writing, and you can measure how well you are speaking or how confident you are when you're speaking. So be specific about what you want to measure and how you want to measure it. And then, if possible, ask for feedback. So I know you've done this personally with me before, and I can personally tell you that your English has improved tremendously since we first met. And I imagine it is still improving every single week. So sometimes all you need is for someone to tell you, no, actually, Ricardo, you're not stuck. Your English is much better. Your English is better than it was last month. Your English is better than it was last week. So sometimes you just need an objective, unrelated person that can tell you, like, hey, you're actually not stuck. And then that is very liberating. It at least gives you another perspective, another point of view. So that is one perspective I have, is just to consider, are you really stuck? And if so, how can you measure that? So if you really believe I'm not improving, how can you prove it? Another kind of very, very different response I have to your question is because you were talking about a feeling, you're talking about an emotion, then I would just recommend trying something totally new and different. So in your question, you said you're listening to a lot of podcasts and doing a lot of reading. So maybe for 1 month, try the opposite. Don't listen to any podcasts or reading. Focus 100% on having conversations, or try to give a presentation in English. Or, I don't know, if you normally study inside, exclusively study outside when you're walking or on your bike or something like that. In my personal experience, when I feel stuck, one of the easiest ways to get out of that feeling of stagnation is just to completely change what I'm doing, change my environment. And sometimes that is enough to really relieve that feeling of stagnation. So a few good ways to do these are like short little challenges. So just to say, okay, for the next 28 days, I'm going to do this every day, and I'm going to measure my progress, and I'm going to see what happens. That's an approach that I like because it's short, it's doable, it's manageable, and it's trackable. And last but not least, remember at the end of the day, learning a new language is a huge, huge project. It's a project for life. Honestly, it never stops. It never stops. So I know personally with my Portuguese, I feel stuck all of the time. There are many days when I wake up and I just think, like, my goodness, I can quite literally not speak Portuguese today. And it's difficult to deal with. So try to be patient because it's a big project. It's something that you're investing a lot of time and energy and love into. So try to be patient, try to be kind and soft with yourself. Try to be compassionate with yourself. I know that all of those things are much easier said than done, but I think they can be really useful. Okay, Ricardo, I think that is all the advice I have for you today. Thank you for your very thoughtful question, as always. If anyone else has questions, please submit them to the podcast. Alexia and I will answer them. And as always, keep up the good fight and lose well.